Hey there, welcome to Millennium Milestone Presents, a site dedicated to storytelling in books, movies, video games, and other exciting genres, where if you missed a train for hate watching The Acolyte, you got the next best thing right now. And that next best thing comes in the form of quite a few names I could give to this. Most important I've usually said online is Dollar Store and Iron Man, Token Iron Man, or Spider-Man Jr., or what else you could come up with. I'm sure you guys have come up with plenty of names for the infamous Ironheart that we're about to finally be engraced with as we get to find out what is all this about, the fuss about this one new series coming from Disney+. Let's see what Marvel has come up with this time.
I want to build something undeniable, something iconic. It's a brand new...
Now, right off the bat, I am going to admit, clearly you're hearing from my voice, that there is a bit of bias here in this review of this series, as I'm just a true fan of Tony Stark Iron Man, and anything where a hand-me-down version of the character is presented is never going to go the best way with me. That being said, I am going to try my best to be as absolutely unequivocally unbiased with the review, if you believe me, even as I'm laughing saying that, because first off, I want to get this out of the way. Ryan Coogler, I am a fan of. I did love Black Panther 1. After watching Wakanda Forever again, I have doubts about that movie, about how much I really enjoyed it, because it has some issues that I will definitely address in a review of that movie when I get around to that. And then also, recently, Ryan Coogler did Sinners, which I thought was a fantastic film, which also deserves a very good, fair review in as well. So, to say that Ryan Coogler is terrible is not even close in any way a fair assessment of him. But on this one series, there needs to be a fair, unequivocal take on this that I'm going to give right now. The Ironheart series centers around Riri Williams, a young brilliant inventor who creates a technologically advanced suit of armor similar to Iron Man's. Who could have noticed the difference? The series explores Riri's journey as she navigates the challenges of using her invention, balancing her ambition with the unexpected consequences of her actions, confronting the mysterious Parker Robbins, also known as the Hood. The show is set after the events of Black Panther Wakanda Forever, where Riri's vibranium detector caught at the attention of Wakanda agents. That is, if you watched Wakanda Forever. If you don't have that reference, I suggest you watch that before you watch the series, because you will be slightly a little lost, even though I'll admit, in the first episode, there are some interesting story bits I'm wondering about as to how they fit from the original movie. We follow up with Riri in the very first episode, where she's kicked out of an MIT school. There she apparently had squandered 4 years that she had trying to build an Iron Man suit there. And also, in the meantime, to fund her said fun project, she did questionable things, such as basically cheating for other students on other campuses and building projects for them that were not their own, of course. This culminates in her being kicked out of the school, and having nothing but a chip on her shoulder, she decides, I'll just go home and call it a day. But instead, she steals her funded Iron Man suit and heads straight back to Chicago with the suit.
Seriously?
Instead of getting a home welcome, she, of course, her suit signs off and malfunctions and causes her to crash right into Chicago, and caused quite an embarrassment to herself, as she has to walk all the way back to her home with the entire suit in shambles at this point. Meanwhile, on another side of town, we are introduced to the Red Hood and his underlings, who are nothing but a bunch of thieves, who go and try to steal some artwork at a gallery. Of course, this is all botched because their tech guy, Stu, who likes to call himself Rampage, does not do a good job of making sure that all the security feeds are under control. This causes them to escape with their lives and come up with empty-handed with nothing. This serves as a moving forward point that now the Hood needs another technician that can do a better job than Stewart. And just as predictable as the show has already begun to show, lo and behold, Riri is just flying right above everybody, showing them the answer to all their prayers for this show to begin its very interesting plot. We head on over back to Riri meeting up with an old friend of hers named Xavier, who helps her to try and piece together new parts for the new Iron Man suit that she needs to build. And in the meantime, when she heads over to a junkyard to get said parts, she runs into an old friend who reminds her of someone he used to see her come around with all the time to the junkyard, which was that of Natalie, her best friend, who, at least is hinted, is definitely no longer around and passed away. And we get hints of that as we move along with the plot of the story. Riri tries to convince the owner of the junkyard to give her a break to try and pay him back some of the money that she would owe him to gather up some of the parts for her Iron Man suit. In the midst of doing that, a man named John arrives and offers some money to pay for some of the parts that she needs. Curious as to why he did this, John explains to her that he has an invitation for her, that of Parker Robbins, the Hood, who would like to meet with her and offer her an opportunity that would allow her to be fully funded and finish the project of her dreams.
Okay, I'm not suspicious of you at all.
The next day, Riri, despite her misgivings about the offer, heads over to the meetup of Parker's location, and is of course tested right off the bat to see how quickly she can think on her feet by being trapped in an elevator and show off some of the most talented brain-inducing ways you can get out of an elevator. After escaping said death trap and finally meeting the infamous Parker Robbins, of course, makes the offer to her to join his crew and makes it very clear that he can handsomely reward her for everything she needs for her part. She would help him with several heists that are definitely questionable, definitely illegal, and definitely would get her in trouble. Totally, absolutely a heroic thing even Iron Man would do. Yeah.
Not a great plan.
At the last part of their conversation, Parker makes it very clear that in order for their jobs to be worked out, he definitely needs her to build her new Iron Man suit as soon as possible and have it ready for the very first heist. Desperate for the cash and desperate to want to get the suit finally finished, Riri does everything possible to work overnight to put the suit together, and finally does one last thing to touch up the suit a little bit better, with that of inducing it with her brain algorithm to see if she can create her own AI. And lo and behold, no particular talent necessary to do this, pops up her dream AI, that of Natalie.
Well, who the hell else would it be, bish?
Now, to be fair, once again, again, you can hear my voice. Natalie is a part of the Ironheart lore. There is a story behind it, as we already mentioned early on, so there is reason for this, but dear God, did this have to be her AI in this god-awful fashion? I don't mind it, but definitely not feeling it for the moment.
You could call me neuro-autonomous technical assistant and laboratory intelligence entity instead.
It doesn't matter what your name is!
No, I'm good. I think I'll just stick with Natalie. That's a perfectly normal name enough to stick with the plot of the story. Speaking of the plot of the story for Episode 2, we now pick up where we left off in the last episode, where Natalie explains her existence to Riri as to the best of its or what ability it has, as it now has become the artificial intelligence of Riri's Iron Man suit. Clearly, the appearance of Natalie seems to be bringing back some kind of traumatic memory for Riri, who we had seen in the last episode some flashbacks of something that must have happened to her that ended Natalie's life, as well as that of her foster father, who, oddly enough, I do need to point out, does not get mentioned nearly enough as Natalie does. Just saying. What does get mentioned in this episode is definitely the crew of misfits that the Hood has hired and put together for a job that Riri is going to be part of doing. And when I say crew, this is quite a crew. I mean, look at it. Look at it! Now, in case you're wondering why I'm laughing so much at this, boy, the original Slug is so reminiscent of the Marvel Comics version. Totally not a race swap of any sort, as the rest of the crew appears to be. Before we go, John, the Hood's right-hand man, explains to the rest of the crew the heist that they're going to pull against the owner, or much less the inventor of the tunnels for Chicago, and are going to try to swindle her into signing a contract to appropriate funds for their livelihood. So you would think that this wouldn't be questionable, and maybe perhaps Riri would have a conscience and perhaps think that maybe the best thing to do is not do this at all.
So, like, when do we get paid?
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Screw that!
Well, I guess that father figure of hers didn't leave that impressionable of a mind on her, as she works together to get her suit up and running for the heist that she has to pull with the Hood's gang. With Natalie's help, Riri manages to find a black market seller to con into getting her more parts for the Iron Man suit to get it up and running before the heist is started.
Are you crying?
Sorry, sometimes it just happens. It's totally involuntary.
What a wuss!
Gee, I couldn't tell from all the other virtue signaling we get in this show, as it really highlights what manly men we got on this show here, doesn't it? Well, as for the heist, it turns out to be quite the disaster, as Riri drops a piece of tech that was given to her to shut down the tunnels and help the Hood eventually reach the owner of the tunnels and swindle her with the cash that they want. However, Natalie improvises in her own way and manages to help her get out of this situation, and they finally manage to execute the plan. Not quite the way they planned it, but it worked. However, coming out of the tunnels, Natalie glitches out when a security guard comes out to arrest Riri and leaves her frozen in almost the same situation that may have occurred in her past. But luckily, someone's there to save her? Maybe? Well, the Hood's bullet ricochets around her and hits the security guard in the shoulder, and off they go to not be caught up in anything. So you would think, after hanging out with these guys for quite a bit, and Riri sees that they're all sketchy and sus and everything, maybe this might be the time to just call it a day and take your payday and just leave.
Parker is sus, but this is an in and out job.
Remember, with great power.
Shut up, old man.
Yeah, you might as well be telling him that, because Riri just doesn't seem to get it, and yep, she's going to keep going. Now, I would be remiss if I had not mentioned, of course, that Natalie did detect something that was kind of sinister about Parker, which, as if that wasn't enough to tell Riri that maybe it's time to just take off. But, as I said before, she's just going to keep going. But, anyways, we move on to another scene where Riri remembers that she had a date that she was supposed to do, and fast being late, she arrives over there. In another scene, we skip over to Parker Robinson's hideout with his crew, and John is trying to check on him to make sure that whatever's possessing him is not hurting him any further than he is, and expresses concern that maybe he needs to get help for this, but Parker says he has a handle on whatever it is he's using. Speaking of other family concerns, Riri returns back home, and of course her mother finally confronts her about the creation of Natalie, as Natalie had earlier escaped from the laptop to help out Riri with her plan to help the crew, and they finally have a heart-to-heart about what happened, and at least it leads to something where they're trying to make amends for what had happened in the past. And finally, for the end of this episode, we go back to Joe, the black market seller that gave Riri what she needed to finish her Iron Man suit. And for some reason, the episode ends with this, but there isn't any real hint, but clearly it's trying to indicate that there is something important about him that we need to note. What that is, I guess we'll find out in the very next episode.
Around your fro. Me hardcore. It's my ship, them a jump on board.
Oh, somebody kill me, please!
Yeah, that's how I was feeling right about at this point after 2 episodes. I was reaching around to see if I did own a gun, and sadly, to my realization, I don't own one. So rat poison it is after I'm done with this 3rd episode, where Riri is celebrating with her friends all the money they've laundered from this little job they did. And as they're playing around, Clown decides to come down and, true to her interesting name, decides to clown around with the Hood's hood, so to speak. Didn't think I'd be making that many double entendres in this. But here we are, and Clown decides to see if they can play around with it. And of course, John comes in angry and ready to stomp a hole in her head for that, and Riri has to intervene and try to calm him down. The Hood finally shows up and tells everyone to take a break off, relax, and enjoy the millions while they get ready for the next job.
About these heists? We Ocean's 11 or The Sopranos?
Are you stupid or something?
Yeah, definitely was asking a question about that one too, as Riri is questioning the Hood's motives as if robbing was not a motivation to think twice about what you were doing as is. But here we are, as of course the Hood, clearly states the crap that she's trying to pull here, as he's already made it clear. What part of this is not shady that you don't understand? You wanted this because you needed this. So why are you even here? So he brushes it off and tells her to leave. One would think that Riri would gain a conscience after that kind of conversation, but lo and behold, she goes and buys Xavier new headphones to enjoy, which doesn't seem to please him, as he indicates that he already has headphones that matter to him, that of Natalie's, which sort of sparks a bit of a traumatic feeling in Riri's heart. But she brushes it off and listens a little bit to what Xavier says as he tries to ask her what she is up to and how is it that she went from dumpster diving to now being able to afford things all of a sudden. But she doesn't give him any true answers at this time. To add more complications to Riri's growing new enterprise, Joe arrives at her home and blackmails Riri into helping him continue his work at his home in exchange that he doesn't mention anything to her mother. To Riri's dismay, she agrees to do this and will come see him tomorrow to brainstorm more what they're going to do.
Yeah, I know, I'm a criminal.
You are the dumbest smart person I have ever met in my life.
Now, before when Natalie was introduced, I will admit I had a bit of a reaction of thinking, this is god-awful. But I come to realize that I actually like Natalie a lot more than I like Riri at this point. Because Natalie has been the voice of reason in everything possible, even helping her to deal with her issues. Almost like I kind of wish Natalie was the real main character here instead of Riri. But anyways, here we are in this scene where, of course, Natalie's trying to do just that, reason to Riri's common sense here, which is definitely not there because she's too busy trying to be the smart genius she claims she is. And, of course, they finally agree at least to just chill out for the day and maybe get to know each other a little bit better as friends. Although the day together turns out to be pretty calm and relaxed for them, Natalie then finally decides to try and get Riri to come back to the garage to face some of her trauma that she's been ignoring for all this time. This, of course, sparks a panic attack in her, which again stresses how much she has not really learned from what has transpired from before. Natalie does her best to calm her down and to just breathe and relax, and finally gets her back to a solid base. Well, after that experience, Riri is now back to normal. Nothing else is going to cause her any more panic attacks or anything to calm her nerves. Not even that when the cops drop by to announce that Stuart, a.k.a. Rampage, is dead.
Stuart got murked. Yo, they could have murked me. I knew something was off. Shit.
You don't say.
So rather than come clean and fess up to the cops, because that would be stupid. Why would a minority want to talk to the cops at this time? But Riri comes up with a better plan, try to get evidence ahead of the Hood to get them incriminated and not her. So she decides that she's going to try and get a piece of the Hood's cape, or robe I should say, and try to analyze it to figure out what is his deal and if he was responsible for Stewart's death in that regard. Back at the Hood's lair, Parker and John discuss the plans for going after Heirloom Industries, and John tries to convince him that perhaps this is not the best time to do this job because he cannot find anything to leverage the owner of this company or anything weaknesses that would work out, that this is a very high-tech, very sophisticated fortress and it would prove to be very dangerous. However, Parker insists to go through with the plan. He trusts that whatever happens will work out in the end. Next up, we are over at Joe's place once again, with Riri visiting to come up with a plan for the synthetic skin tech that they were proposing early on. While working on this tech, Joe apparently injured himself and needed a little help with Riri to get the tech off his skin and to figure out some of the quirks in it as well. While doing so, and looking through the counter, particularly in the cookie jar, for some medical aid, Riri comes upon something that she did not expect.
Oh, Joe, why is he in a baggie?
We weren't close.
Close as in related to someone that we come to discover is someone we remember from yesteryear.
Oh man! Oh God! Oh man! Oh God! Oh man! Oh God! Oh man! Oh God! Oh man! Oh God!
I'm Ezekiel. Stain.
Now, in all the grand scheme of things, does this even matter at this point? I mean, yes, he's related to someone that nearly tried to kill Tony Stark ages ago, but what relation does this man have to Riri in any fashion other than the tech that he's willingly giving to her because of his white privilege, has to give her what she needs?
Wait a minute!
Are you starting to catch on to what's going on here? Yeah, it's becoming apparent that a lot of the show stems from what was going on during the Summer of Love era, or the BLM era. And we're getting a lot of that in the show, and you're going to see a lot more of it as it goes on, because they all symbolize in some shape or form that, as well as the identity politics that comes with many shows that fell under this category. So onward to the next part of the plot, as Riri meets up with the entire team over at Heirloom Industries, the facility that is probably much tighter than even Fort Knox. She sets up along a watchtower to watch over everyone as they begin to gain access to the facility. Riri sneaks out of her suit and tasks Natalie with taking over the suit, pretending to be her, while she ventures underwater into the facility in hopes of trying to get a piece of the fabric off of Parker Robin's red cape. Riri makes her way to the center of the facility, where Parker now is meeting up with Hunter and doing once again the same scandal he pulled on the woman with the tunnel company that she ran in Chicago. Once again, he tries to do this, and of course Hunter turns the tables on and then pretty much just offers him cash, which isn't pleasing to him, so he sends his minions to do his bidding as they, of course, turn the systems on to ruin all these seeds, rare seeds that is, that he has in his facility. Riri, in the meantime, trying to tear a piece of that fabric off the Hood's cape, accidentally sends off the alarms, and, well, you know.
I think we're in trouble.
And trouble there is. Parker's crew are stuck in several different locations as they're all sealed up and CO2 is being pumped in them to choke them all out to death. Meanwhile, Parker tries to take out not only Hunter but also his minions, and Riri finally gets the fabric and realizes she can finally escape when finally she realizes one little deterrent to her problem. As expected, John doesn't take kindly to Riri stealing a piece of fabric and possibly betraying them. She also reveals to John that she knows that Stewart was killed by either John or Parker, and John realizes there can't be any loose ends, so he tries to end her. However, the CO2 being drained from the room doesn't exactly help the situation, and finally Natalie makes it to the end and does what she does to help Riri, and Riri, of course, having sympathy and empathy for all human life, would do anything to help any person, even John, right? To add to Riri's heroic valor, she tells a half-truth to Parker, telling him basically that John isn't moving and hinting from that voiceover that he's not alive at all, and takes off back to her place, where she realizes with Natalie that the mesh tech that she used to get into the facility is now gone, and she has something to answer to Zeke for that. Meanwhile, Parker is rabidly upset and screams at whoever is the bearer giving him the powers that he possesses from his cloak, and the entity, or whatever it is, tells him, or shows him rather, what happened to John.
Talk to me. Breathe. Breathe.
Yeah, breathing was quite the exercise for me watching these first 3 episodes of Ironheart. Not gonna lie, this was a tough watch for 3 episodes. And like I said, I did try my hardest, I really mean it, to try and be objective with this. But I do see that there are serious issues with this series to begin with. Maybe the easiest way for me to put it in just simple terms, it understands what super is, but it lacks a fundamental understanding of what a hero is. You might have noticed in the video, I popped in a few times Parker's Uncle Ben quoting the very famous line, "With great power comes with great responsibility." And while, yes, it's not tied into anything with Ironheart, or let alone Iron Man, it is a simple, fundamental idea of what a superhero should understand in any situation, even one that's learning to be a hero. The problem with this series is that Riri's motivations are completely selfish, narcissistic, and have no meaning for anyone on the outside looking into her world. It tries its hardest to make Riri this sympathetic character that is underprivileged and lacking anything when, for crying out loud, the woman was in Wakanda, learned how to build tech from them, as well as from her own tech that she built for Tony Stark. And she makes excuse after excuse from the beginning in the first episode that she is being held down to her potential. Why does that sound familiar? Well, once again, you might have noticed I mentioned early on about the BLM and Summer of Love period, and that was the banner, the call to arms, so to speak, of anyone that thought that in identity politics this was going to work in this story, which was produced around that time period. And now, finally, it gets dumped on us a good number of years after the fact. And I have to say, on one hand, I have no sympathy for the characters in the story, but I feel bad for the people that thought they were trying to give us something that was meaningful, that was being respected, when the company, Marvel, or maybe more so Disney, just basically dumped them to the wayside when it looked like things were not going their way because of presidential elections and other things and other factors that really should not have anything to do with our entertainment. But most of all, Riri, the character herself, is fundamentally flawed in the worst way possible. Usually you want a flawed character, but her characterization in this series is stemmed from narcissistic, selfish attitudes that really do not make a good superhero. Yeah, you had Tony Stark, who was narcissistic, he was self-indulged, but this was a man that learned something from that period when he finally realized that there was more to life than making money and tech. He sought out to change things. What has Riri been looking for other than to just give to herself what she needs? She hasn't given back to anyone, though, so far. And maybe later on in the series they're going to show that. Maybe there is going to be heroics in this. But right now, at least for the first 3 episodes, they are not doing a good job of presenting Riri as someone that I want to be invested in. Now, there may be a way for the character to go from that to maybe being a beloved character, but it's going to be a bit of a stretch if Marvel has already thought that far ahead. I'll give you an example of someone who was narcissistic and then was a character that came to be loved. Ahsoka Tano from the Clone Wars. Dave Filoni was a very brilliant man in at least this aspect, this character specifically. There are other issues we have with Dave Filoni, but at least we can say that with Ahsoka, he started her off as being a narcissistic young adolescent who didn't understand the way how the real world works. But she learned through the clones, through her interactions throughout the Clone Wars, that she needed to change her attitude. And that's what needs to save this series. Riri's attitude needs to change very fundamentally, not just simply with regret after the fact of making a mistake. She needs to have a fundamental desire to do things for others and not for herself. And that's really the core of, oddly enough, Ironheart. I mean, the heart of the matter is how she feels about herself and others. If they would do a better job with that, we might actually be invested in this character. But unfortunately, when they wrote her in the comics, she was not presented well. On X.com, formerly known as Twitter, Master the TDS brought out some of the old lore from the comics. I would suggest you look at that if you have a chance. And even he has a YouTube channel here as well. You can definitely check it out. I'll put a link in here so you have a look at that. And it shows that even in the comics, this is exactly how Riri was, which is where Marvel went wrong with this character. This is one of those situations where sometimes, once again, we saw this with The Last of Us, that sometimes it may not always be a good idea to use entirely the source material. It might be best to take away some characteristics to highlight the better parts of Riri Williams. Well, those are my final thoughts on the first 3 episodes of Ironheart. I'm still only going to just start off the beginning episodes, and then when it gets to the final end, I'll recap what was in the middle, and then follow up with the last 3 episodes. If you're okay with that, then give me a thumbs up and let me know in the comments, or if you don't like that, I would like to know if you want me to change that up and perhaps do episode by episode, break down everything. But hey, like, share, and subscribe, and you know the outro I usually say, you best better believe I'll be back.